The package was an anomaly, an unwelcome deviation in the meticulously ordered life of Dr. Emil Hart. It lay on his otherwise sterile laboratory bench, a plain brown box. No return address, no sender of note, just his name printed in a stark, impersonal font. Intriguing, most irregular. Clinical pharmacologists, even those of Hart's modest renown, did not typically receive unsolicited parcels of this nature. His days were a predictable cadence of research, data analysis, and the occasional tedious administrative meeting. This box, however, pulsed with an unspoken question, a silent dare. He observed it for a full 3 minutes, calculating, considering. Inside, nestled amongst an excessive amount of protective foam, was a single amber-colored vial. It contained perhaps 30 small, unassuming capsules. Alongside it, a simple, folded note. The paper was of a surprisingly high quality, thick and textured. The message, however, was brief, terse even. VN93, observe, report, the future awaits, no signature, no further explanation, just those cryptic words, VN93. It sounded like a designation, a project code. Hart's mind, trained to dissect complex chemical compounds, now turned to dissecting this puzzle. Who would send this, and why to him? The audacity was remarkable. He picked up the vial. The capsules were a deep obsidian black, smooth, seamless. They felt cool to the touch, almost alien. Hart, a man of science, a disciple of empirical evidence, felt an uncharacteristic shiver, not of fear, but of something akin to anticipation. This was not standard pharmaceutical practice. This was something else entirely, something that skirted the edges of the known, the regulated. The note's final phrase, "The future awaits," echoed in the quiet of his lab. A rather grandiose claim for an unknown substance. Yet the presentation had a certain theatrical flair. His fingers drummed against the cool glass of the vial. The observed part was clear enough. His entire career was built upon observation. But report? To whom? The sender remained a ghost, a phantom in this unfolding drama. The lack of information was, paradoxically, the most compelling piece of data. It suggested confidence, or perhaps recklessness. Hart knew he should, by all professional and ethical standards, dispose of the vial, report it to the authorities. Yet the scientist in him, the relentless pursuer of knowledge, was undeniably hooked. The game, it appeared, was afoot. Dr. Hart, despite the irregularity of its arrival, approached VN93 with rigorous scientific discipline. He couldn't simply ingest an unknown substance, that would be foolhardy, amateurish. Instead, he initiated a series of meticulous in vitro tests. Cell cultures were prepared, spectrometers calibrated, microscopes focused. The initial analyses were baffling. The compound was incredibly complex, a sophisticated blend of known vitamins, minerals, and amino acids, but also unidentifiable organic molecules. Molecules that seemed to interact with cellular structures in ways he had never witnessed. It was more than a multivitamin, much more. The data began to paint an astonishing picture. VN93 appeared to stimulate telomere lengthening, not aggressively but consistently. It enhanced mitochondrial efficiency by a staggering 30%. Cellular repair mechanisms, normally a slow, methodical process, were accelerated. Oxidative stress markers plummeted. Damaged DNA strands showed signs of minor yet precise self-correction. It was as if each cell, upon exposure to VN93, was being gently nudged towards its optimal state, its perfect, uncorrupted blueprint. Hart checked his equipment, reran the tests. The results remained consistent, undeniable. This was not mere supplementation, this was cellular optimization. He cross-referenced the molecular structures against every known database. Nothing. The unique components were entirely novel. Their synthesis would require an intellect of considerable prowess and resources to match. This was not the product of some back-alley chemist. This was high science, perhaps revolutionary science. The implications were, frankly, immense. Enhanced cognitive function, improved physical resilience, a significant slowing of the aging process. These were not just health benefits, they were enhancements. A subtle, yet profound, alteration of human biology. The phrase minor DNA repair from the initial fleeting thought now seemed an understatement. The initial tests on animal models, conducted with extreme caution and ethical oversight, mirrored the in vitro findings. Increased vitality, faster healing, even improved problem-solving skills in laboratory rats. The creatures seemed brighter, more alert. There were no discernible negative side effects, none. This was the most perplexing part. Such potent biological activity usually came with a cost, a trade-off. But VN93 appeared to be benignly transformative. Dr. Hart found himself staring at the data readouts late into the night. The glow of the monitor illuminating a face etched with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The future, as the note proclaimed, was indeed knocking. The sheer scope of VN93's potential necessitated collaboration. Dr. Hart, while brilliant in pharmacology, recognized the need for another perspective, a different skill set. He needed someone he could trust, implicitly. His thoughts turned to Dr. Aanya Velasquez, a geneticist, sharp, unconventional, with an intuitive grasp of biological systems that often bordered on the uncanny. They had clashed intellectually in the past, their methodologies sometimes differing, but mutual respect had always remained. Velasquez was not one to shy away from the unorthodox. She would see the patterns he might miss. She would challenge his assumptions. He presented his findings to Aanya in his lab. The vial, the note, the astonishing data printouts. He watched her face carefully as she absorbed the information. Her initial skepticism, a default setting for any good scientist, slowly gave way to focused intensity. She peppered him with questions, pointed, incisive. She examined the molecular diagrams, her fingers tracing the intricate structures on the screen. "Emil," she finally said, her voice low, "if this data is accurate, and I see no reason to doubt your meticulousness, then this isn't just a supplement, it's a key. To what precisely I'm not yet sure, but it unlocks something fundamental." Their collaboration began in earnest. Anya's expertise in genetics provided new avenues of investigation. They pooled their resources, working in clandestine fashion, aware of the potentially disruptive nature of their research. The university labs were used after hours. Favors were called in. They were operating in a gray area, driven by the sheer scientific magnetism of VN93. Anya's insights into gene expression and protein synthesis helped to further elucidate the mechanisms by which VN93 operated. She hypothesized that the novel compounds were acting as sophisticated signaling molecules, awakening dormant genetic pathways related to resilience, longevity. Their partnership was a fusion of Hart's precise, methodical approach and Velasquez's intuitive, systemic thinking. He focused on the how, she explored the why and the what if. Arguments were frequent, intense, but always productive. They were two minds orbiting a shared, luminous enigma. The mystery of VN93 deepened with every discovery, yet its promise became ever more tangible. "Someone out there," Emil, Aanya mused one evening, staring at a projection of a replicating cell, "is playing God. The question is, are they benevolent? Or are we merely pieces in a much larger, unseen game?" The weight of that question settled heavily between them. With the preliminary animal trials showing remarkable success and no adverse effects, the ethical quandary of human testing loomed large. VN93 was unapproved, its origins unknown. Yet the potential benefits were too significant to ignore. After much debate, Hart and Velasquez devised a small, highly confidential and ethically fraught observational study. They identified a handful of individuals, people with chronic, debilitating conditions where conventional medicine offered little hope. Volunteers, fully informed of the experimental nature and unknown risks, though not the full extent of the DNA repair hypothesis. The consent forms were extensive, the burden of responsibility, immense. The initial reports from these carefully selected participants were nothing short of astounding. A retired concert pianist with severe arthritis in her hands reported a gradual return of dexterity, a lessening of pain that brought tears to her eyes. She could play again. Simple melodies at first, then more complex pieces. A former athlete, grounded by chronic fatigue syndrome, described a surge of energy he hadn't felt in decades. He started walking, then jogging. His world, previously shrunk to the confines of his home, began to expand. These were not mere anecdotes, they were accompanied by measurable physiological improvements. Reduced inflammation markers, improved cardiovascular function, enhanced cognitive acuity. Dr. Hart and Dr. Velasquez conducted detailed interviews. They listened as participants described subtle shifts. Sharper focus, deeper sleep, a pervasive sense of well-being that went beyond the alleviation of specific symptoms. One participant, a history professor, spoke of recalling long-forgotten details with vivid clarity, of making new intellectual connections with an exhilarating ease. "It's like a fog has lifted from my mind," he explained, his eyes bright with a newfound vitality. There was a common thread, a feeling of rejuvenation, not just physical, but mental, a quiet blossoming from within. The transformations were subtle enough to be missed by a casual observer, yet life-altering for those experiencing them. The ethical weight on Hart and Velasquez grew with each positive report. They were gatekeepers to something extraordinary, something that could alleviate suffering on a massive scale. But the unknown variables remained. The long-term effects were still a mystery. Who was the architect of VN93? What was their ultimate agenda? The astonishing efficacy of the supplement only amplified these concerns. They were witnessing the first whispers of a profound change, a ripple in the pond of human biology. The participants, their lives subtly but undeniably enhanced, were the living proof. Their testimonies were both a vindication and a warning. The Capsule Code was rewriting more than just cellular instructions, it was rewriting lives. Section 5, The Shattered Sanctum, a new dangerous cipher. The relative peace of their clandestine research was brutally interrupted. One morning, Hart arrived at his lab to find the door ajar, not forced, picked, with professional skill. His blood ran cold. Inside, the scene was one of calculated violation. Files were disturbed, but not ransacked. Equipment was scanned, not damaged. Whoever had been there knew exactly what they were looking for, and more disturbingly, what not to touch. The remaining samples of VN93, meticulously stored in a secure refrigerator, were gone. Every last capsule, every microgram of their painstakingly analyzed compound, stolen, vanished. The silence in the lab was heavy, accusatory. Hart felt a surge of anger, quickly followed by a chilling sense of vulnerability. They had been careful, or so they had thought, clearly not careful enough. Someone else knew about VN93. Someone with resources and a disregard for boundaries. Aanya arrived shortly after, her face paling as she took in the scene. The implications were immediate and alarming. If their small, covert operation could be infiltrated so easily, then the creator of VN93, whoever they were, operated on an entirely different level of sophistication and perhaps ruthlessness. This was no longer a purely scientific endeavor. It had crossed into something far more perilous. Then Aanya spotted it. On the bench where the VN93 samples had been. A single capsule, identical in size and shape to the one stolen. But this one was different. A deep sapphire blue. Next to it, another minimalist note, same high-quality paper, same stark font, VN94, evolution requires courage. The choice is yours, no threats, no demands, just an escalation. A new variable in their already complex equation, VN94. What did it signify? An improved version, something more potent, or something entirely different with unknown, perhaps more radical effects? The audacity was breathtaking. A clear message, we see you, we are ahead of you. The break-in was a violation, but the delivery of VN94 was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down. It implied that the loss of the VN93 samples was, to the sender, inconsequential, perhaps even intentional, a way to clear the stage for this new iteration. Hart and Velasquez were no longer just observers. They were participants, whether they liked it or not, in a high-stakes game orchestrated by an unseen puppet master. The theft raised the stakes. The appearance of VN94 raised them exponentially. The question of what to do with this single, enigmatic blue capsule now dominated their every thought. The future wasn't just awaiting, it was accelerating. Section 6. The Precipice of Change, a Calculated Gamble. The arrival of VN94 thrust Hart and Velasquez into a profound ethical vortex. The single blue capsule sat between them, a silent, potent symbol of their dilemma. To analyze it was the obvious scientific step, to understand its composition, its potential effects, its dangers. But the note's implication, evolution requires courage, the choice is yours, suggested something more. A personal test. The break-in had demonstrated that their anonymity was compromised, their research coveted. Whoever was behind this clearly intended for them to engage, not merely to observe from a safe, clinical distance. The pressure was immense, the path forward shrouded in uncertainty. Aanya argued for caution. Extreme caution. Emil, we don't know what this is. VN93 was already pushing boundaries. This could be anything. Irreversible. Dangerous. Her pragmatism was a necessary anchor. Hart, however, felt a different pull. The scientist in him was driven by the need to know, but there was something more. A sense of responsibility, perhaps even a reluctant curiosity about the evolution the note so boldly proclaimed. If humanity was on the cusp of a significant biological shift, did they, as scientists who had glimpsed its potential, have a right to stand aside? Or a duty to understand it, even if it meant taking an unprecedented personal risk? The debate raged for days. Sleep became a luxury. Their conversations were circular, fraught with the weight of potential consequences. To hand it over to authorities now seemed almost naive. What would they do with it? Lock it away? Suppress it? Given the sophistication of the group that had breached Hart's lab, such an action might only provoke them further, or worse, drive the technology deeper underground, into less scrupulous hands. The note implied a direct line of communication, however unorthodox. This was their burden to carry, their decision to make. The isolation of their knowledge was both a curse and a strange kind of power. Ultimately, the decision crystallized. It was Hart who proposed it, his voice quiet but firm. One of us needs to understand it firsthand. The risks are undeniable. But the risk of ignorance, of letting this power proliferate without comprehension, might be greater. After much soul-searching, and with Aanya agreeing to monitor him with every medical safeguard imaginable, Hart made the choice. He would take VN-94. It was a leap into the unknown, a profound gamble with his own biology. The clinical pharmacologist, the man of precise measurements and controlled variables, was about to become the ultimate test subject. The Capsule Code was demanding more than observation. It was demanding participation. Section 7. A World Awakening, the Cascade Effect. While Hart prepared for his personal trial with VN-94, the effects of the original VN-93 began to ripple outwards, far beyond their small initial cohort. The stolen samples, it became clear, were not merely hoarded. They were discreetly, almost untraceably disseminated. First, whispers emerged on obscure online forums. Anecdotes of remarkable recoveries, unexplained enhancements in cognitive and physical abilities. These were initially dismissed as internet folklore, the usual digital noise. But the stories persisted, they grew in number and detail. The patterns were too consistent to ignore. VN-93, or something very much like it, was entering the global bloodstream. The societal reaction was a chaotic symphony of hope, fear, and disbelief. Underground markets for miracle supplements flourished, though the authenticity of many products was dubious. Governments, caught off guard, scrambled to understand the phenomenon. Regulatory agencies issued warnings, but how do you regulate something you can't identify? Something that appears to have no overtly negative side effects, only benefits? The media latched onto the more sensational stories, coining phrases like the Lazarus pill or gene boosters. Ethical debates erupted in public squares and academic halls. Was this the dawn of a new golden age for humanity, or the slippery slope towards an unforeseen dystopia? For those who managed to acquire genuine VN-93, the changes were undeniable. Artists found new depths of creativity, athletes shattered long-standing records, scientists reported breakthroughs at an accelerated pace, productivity soared in certain sectors, yet a subtle divide began to emerge. Those enhanced versus those not. It wasn't overt, not yet. But an undercurrent of unease was palpable. Questions of equity, access, and the very definition of what it meant to be human started to surface. Could society adapt to a population where a segment possessed demonstrably superior biological capabilities? The fabric of social norms began to fray at the edges. Hart and Velasquez watched this global unfolding with a mixture of vindication and profound anxiety. Their initial findings were being validated on a massive scale, but the uncontrolled release was a nightmare scenario. The genie was out of the bottle, and it was clear that the entity behind VN-93, and now VN-94, was orchestrating events on a scale they had never imagined. The world was awakening to a new reality, a reality where the fundamental parameters of human existence were suddenly, inexplicably, malleable. The Capsule Code was no longer a secret shared by a few. It was rapidly becoming a global phenomenon, reshaping lives and challenging the future of the species. Section 8. The Architect of Tomorrow, Kalen's Enigma. As Dr. Hart experienced the subtle yet profound alterations from VN-94 heightened senses, an almost preternatural clarity of thought, and astonishing physical resilience, the need to find the source became paramount. The blue capsule was a step beyond VN-93, accelerating the DNA repair and optimization processes, but still with no discernible negative reactions. It was as if his own biology was being fine-tuned by an invisible master. The clues were scarce, the break-in, the sophisticated chemistry, the untraceable distribution, it all pointed to a mind or an organization of exceptional capability. Aanya, using her not inconsiderable skills in data mining and network analysis, began a deep dive into the fringes of the scientific community, searching for whispers, for anomalies. The breakthrough came from an unexpected quarter, a heavily encrypted research paper, briefly accessible on a darknet server before vanishing. The paper detailed theoretical work on somatic genomic harmonization, a concept remarkably similar to the observed effects of VN93 and VN94. The author, Dr. Mira Kalin, a brilliant, enigmatic biochemist and geneticist who had disappeared from academia years prior, after her radical theories on human evolutionary potential were dismissed as fringe science. Her digital footprint was almost non-existent. A ghost. But the name resonated. Kalin. It felt right. The architect, the orchestrator. Following a faint trail of shell corporations and anonymized patents, Hart and Velasquez uncovered whispers of a hidden facility, a place spoken of in hushed, almost mythical tones by those few who had even heard of it, the reactor. Not a nuclear reactor, but a biological one, a crucible for Kalin's visionary and perhaps dangerous work. Locating it was like chasing a phantom through a labyrinth of digital misdirection and corporate camouflage, but Kalin, it seemed, wanted to be found. Or at least, she was not entirely opposed to her pursuers making progress. Subtle digital breadcrumbs appeared, leading them towards a remote, undisclosed location. The reactor, when they finally identified its probable vicinity through satellite imagery and logistical analysis, was an architectural marvel of stealth and advanced technology, seamlessly integrated into a desolate, untouched landscape. It was clear that this was no mere laboratory. It was a self-contained ecosystem dedicated to a singular, audacious purpose: the deliberate, guided evolution of humankind. Dr. Mira Kalin was not just a rogue scientist, she was a visionary, or a zealot, operating on a scale that beggared belief, with resources that defied comprehension. She was the source of the Capsule Code, the architect of tomorrow, and Hart and Velasquez were now on a direct trajectory to confront her, and her grand design. Section 9. The Dawning of a New Epoch, Humanity Redefined. The confrontation with Dr. Mira Kalin within the reactor was less a confrontation and more an unveiling. She was not the malevolent figure they might have half expected, but a woman of intense focus and unwavering conviction. Kalin explained her philosophy. Humanity was at an evolutionary standstill, threatened by self-inflicted wounds, environmental degradation, disease, societal stagnation. VN93 was a gentle nudge, VN94 a more significant push. Her work, she claimed, was not about creating superhumans but about unlocking humanity's inherent potential for resilience, adaptation, and ultimately, survival. Evolution, she stated, her voice calm and resonant, is not a spectator sport. It demands active participation, conscious choice. Kalin revealed the existence of VN95. This next iteration was not delivered in a capsule. It was a meticulously engineered bioagent designed for atmospheric dispersal. Its effects, she explained, would be more profound, triggering a deeper, more systemic recalibration of human DNA. It aimed to enhance not just individual health, but collective traits, increased empathy, enhanced cooperative instincts, a greater capacity for complex problem-solving on a societal level. Her vision was of a humanity better equipped to face existential threats, a species capable of transcending its self-destructive tendencies. The ethical implications were staggering. This was forced evolution on a global scale, albeit benevolently intended. The choice Kalin presented to Hart and Velasquez was monumental. They could attempt to stop her, to expose the reactor and its work, potentially plunging the world into chaos as governments and factions vied for control of this transformative technology. Or they could assist, help guide the transition, mitigate the inevitable disruptions, and ensure Kalin's vision did not become a perversion of its intent. Hart, having experienced VN94, felt the subtle enhancements within himself, a clarity, a resilience he hadn't known before. Velasquez, ever the pragmatist, wrestled with the sheer audacity, the abrogation of individual consent on such a colossal scale. The fate of human evolution hung in the balance of their decision. Ultimately, Kalin revealed her final creation, VN96. This was not a universal agent but a personalized countermeasure, a biological off-switch or modulator, capable of fine-tuning or even reversing the effects of the previous VN series, should unforeseen detrimental consequences arise. It was her failsafe, her acknowledgement of the immense power she wielded, and the humility required. Humanity must choose its path, Kalin concluded, but it should do so with the best possible tools and the wisdom to use them. VN96 is that wisdom, the final part of the code. The dawn of this new epoch was not just about biological change, but about the urgent need for a new level of collective responsibility, A future where science and ethics walked hand in hand, guiding humanity beyond its known horizons.